Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever the fuck you're watching this episode. It's another episode of Backyard Blitz brought to you by Backyard Sports, and we have some off-season and some combine stuff to talk about this episode. Gary Freeze, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Uh, Pretty stoked that Washington is actually in the conversation for positive offseason vibes. It's been a long time. Coming off a really good rookie campaign from Jaden. Team goes all in. We'll talk about that trade. Well, I shouldn't say all in, but they dip into the trade waters and put some weapons around Jaden. So we'll talk about that in just a moment, though.
Definitely, and definitely credit to the Washington organization, really kind of making big waves, big changes just in the time since the move on from ownership and so on and so forth. So happy for him. We got lots of stuff to get into, so Gary, I can just let you jump right into
it. Yeah, well, we'll talk Debo trade right off the bat. The price was pretty unbelievable. Everybody wants to talk about the money. We have like $100 million in cap space. It's something crazy. It's not quite 100, but cap went up a bit. We already had the fourth most space. So the $17 million cap hit to me is negligible. He's going to be motivated. It's a contract year. If he's like 80% of what he was in San Francisco, he'll be a great number 2 option for us behind Terry McLaurin. Terry had a career year, broke a bunch of Washington records. He and Jaden have obvious chemistry. The health concerns are a thing. Everybody's kind of talked about that as like being the big thing with this Debo trade. He's only missed 2 games the last 2 years, so maybe it's not as big a deal, but I know that he is nicked a lot. He plays through a lot of injuries. He played through pneumonia last year at one point, couldn't practice, couldn't really put in any training, and was still fairly productive on the field despite dealing with that. So, he's a tough guy. I've stood by the fact that I think he's the toughest tackle in football. And hopefully he's still got some of that juice left. We'll see. And then, it's kind of who's next after this, because I think Zacchaeus is going to be gone. I don't think we're going to re-sign him. I think Noah Brown's going to be gone, and I wouldn't be surprised if like a Luke McCaffrey becomes just the full-time slot receiver with Debo and Terry on the outside. This sort of changes what I thought free agency and draft would look like as well. I thought we'd be looking maybe day 1 or 2 for a wide receiver to pair opposite McLaurin. That still might be the case, but I think this gives us the flexibility to say, like, we don't have to press to get a number 2 wide receiver. We can let something fall to us. I'd love to see. We're going to talk about a couple of guys from Iowa State. Wouldn't mind seeing, maybe a playmaker that could fall a little bit. There's talk of maybe a Luther Burden. So I think it changes, what Washington can do with the draft. And it really, the calculus now is like, who's the best player available, as opposed to this is one less hole to fill, essentially, which is nice. And at the price, a 5th round pick. We just watched Dallas trade for Jonathan Mingo. They traded a 4th. We traded John Dotson to the Eagles for a 3rd. Now they went and won the Super Bowl, and he made a catch or 2 in the Super Bowl, but he wasn't productive at all, and it cost them a 3rd round pick. So really getting Debo for a 5, it's a pretty negligible price. If we get some semblance of what he was in San Francisco, it's going to be a great deal.
Right. I guess my question is, what direction do you go, knowing now that you've filled that? I mean, I feel like that was one of the real last like big offensive holes that I feel like you have. Where do you think you're going now? Because I mean, obviously, if you want to try to run and stay in that type of like Shanahan style offense where you're spreading the ball, staying busy on the offense, and my natural progression would be protect your fucking quarterback at all costs.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you nailed that. I think the priority in the offseason is going to be offensive line. It could be secondary because it's a pretty deep free agent class as far as like corners and safeties.
Definitely.
Corners mostly go. And we have a need at corner. We made the trade for Lattimore. I'd like to move Mikey Sainristil back into slot full-time and let him work where he's best, although he was great on the outside last year as a rookie. I think he's best suited to be a full-time slot corner. So if we could go get, another guy opposite of Lattimore, there's a couple of folks in free agency. We have some free agents of our own that we've got to, work through. The potential for trading Jonathan Allen. Is D-line still a priority? I think with Saquon Barkley and what he did this year, I think D-line has to be a priority. So I think it's going to be the trenches is where we're going to be focused now going forward, because we addressed, that the big need at number 2 wide receiver. I could see Washington going out and signing 3 offensive linemen in free agency, maybe a corner, and maybe a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, who's hitting free agency, get him in the trenches, and then maybe draft heavy when it comes to like safety and even a linebacker. Bobby Wagner being gone, I don't know what the long-term answer is there. Luvu was great as kind of that playmaker X, weapon X type role, the star position, if you will. A lot of defenses call it. Luvu did a very good job. So yeah, I think this allows Adam and company to really look at the trenches and say, this is where we need to get better. We didn't do a great job of protecting Jaden last year. He bailed us out of a lot. Our offensive line was bailed out a lot by the fact that he was able to just get free, use his legs. I don't want him having to use his legs 20 times a game. When he needs to, it's great to know that he can. But if we can protect him, I would love for us to make that move to do that. And then on the opposite side of the ball, I mentioned Saquon Barkley and the revival of the running back. Derrick Henry had a great year. I think teams are starting to realize like there's some value here to really run the ball well with what Philly was able to do. I'd love to see us beef up the defensive line as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, your other option based off of what we're seeing in this draft class is going to be surrounded. You're either going to be looking at running back or secondary. And so I think you're probably fine to skip on the running back class here. So just you look at your secondary, look at your offensive line. I mean, you guys are in a good position. And then on top of that, you're losing a 5th for Deebo Samuel. I think that's a fucking great deal. Great deal.
I think day 3, it could be a time when we would look to get like an Eckler replacement. Tootin out of Virginia Tech, I think, is going to go higher. But the guy out of USC, and his name's eluding me right now, but the guy out of USC looks like he could be a real threat as a receiving back. I wouldn't mind seeing him potentially, the 4th or 5th round pick somewhere in there, maybe on day 3, to replace Eckler. But yeah, I think at the top of the draft for us, best player available, but we have, some spots. I wouldn't be mad if we went and found our cornerstone left tackle or right tackle in this draft.
And fortunately, because of the depth in the running back position this year, I mean, I think you're going to be okay to wait that 3rd round.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think you're going to be set. It's actually kind of, working itself pretty well there. Good to see you, senior.
Yeah, the running back class is very deep, for sure.
Excuse me, that was rude as fuck. I should have muted first. But anyways, let's jump into the Matthew Stafford non-trade, really kind of setting a tone here for the Rams. That they're still back in the game. Puka, real quick, to just post a video from the airport celebrating. Love that. Good for the culture there in LA. But I mean, he
knows where his lawn gets watered, man. He knows.
Yeah, I mean, you want the gunslinger, and he's got one. He's retaining him for another year. He's back. And so I guess the question now for LA becomes the understudy. But what does this mean for the shockwave of Stafford not leaving the Rams? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, grass isn't always greener, right? I mean, that's the big thing. Stafford. I think really this was a play for him to see if there was value out there, but also to kind of show the Rams like, hey, I really do want to get a restructure of my deal. I want some more stability. It's clear to me that he's not ready to retire. I know there were talks after the Super Bowl. Everybody, was like, well, is Matt gonna, ride out, or Matthew, I guess is what he prefers, but was he gonna ride off into the sunset with a Super Bowl trophy? He didn't do that. They've made the playoffs the last 2 years. So like, this is good for both sides. Why, if you're the Rams, would you want to move on from that guy who's won you a Super Bowl and you've got a really young core around him and you've made the playoffs? But also, if you're Matthew Stafford, like, why this late in your career would you want to move on from a team that's made the playoffs twice? And not to mention, that division is theirs right now, really, in my opinion, because San Fran looks like they're on the decline. A lot of guys getting long in the tooth. They haven't been able to pay and keep a lot of their guys. I don't know what Ayuk's going to be coming off the injury. They just traded away Debo. CMC's coming off yet another soft tissue injury. You don't know what you're going to get from San Francisco, and Seattle looks like they're kind of tearing it down. And then Arizona is Arizona. Are they going to be scrappy still? Sure. Are they going to get over the hump to challenge for a division title? I don't think so. So really, like, if you're the Rams, you're kind of in the catbird seat. But on the other side of this non-trade, it was the Giants all along that everybody was like, maybe they're going to be the ones to go get Stafford. They're fucking floundering. And, like, are they going to bring in Rodgers? We saw that not work across the fucking hallway with the Jets. I don't know if the Giants want any of that. And winning that late game in the season when Drew Lock put on the fucking Superman's cape, they fucked themselves out of the number 1 pick. So now they're probably going to have to trade up, because when you're sitting at 3 in a 2 quarterback draft, you're basically kind of left to, like, I have to spend the capital to move up, because there's 2 spots ahead of you where teams could trade up and get their guy. And Tennessee's already said they're going to shop it. So you're looking at potentially 1 spot where a team's going to move up and get either Ward or Sanders. And then the Giants are going to be left thinking, like, are we going to be able to move up to 2 and get the other guy? Do we want to move up to 1 and get our guy? What's the price we're willing to pay? Are we willing to sit and hope that we're going to talk about him in just a minute, but are we willing to sit and hope that Jackson Dart's available at the top of the 2nd round? I don't know, right? So it really, I don't mind it as an NFC East fan. I don't mind the Giants floundering, but they're in a tough spot right now, man.
They're in a tough spot, and kind of deservedly so, right? Like, I know that we're in a position where we're supposed to be. We're supposed, like, yeah, I know that, like, I'm sure as the standard fucking talking faces of sports media are supposed to be indifferent. That's not this show. So if that's what you tuned in here, you might want to find another fucking show, because I'll tell you this: they brought this shit completely on themselves. Yes. You gambled on Daniel fucking Jones. You signed this debt warrant. You will pay said money.
You let the guy who just carried basically the Eagles to a Super Bowl championship out the door in your division.
Oh yeah. Just purely talking about the quarterback position, you fucked up, and then you swindled. You somehow swindled yourself out of one of the greatest fucking running backs in this time right now. Period.
Right. Yeah. Just. It's a shit show up there, but honestly, Joe Shane has earned it. His kids tried to talk some sense into him, and he wouldn't listen. Yeah. That Hard Knocks, man, when the staffer was saying, like, are we really going to let Saquon walk? Because and Joe's like, well, he ain't going to get that money on the market, and he'll be back. And, is he worth it? That's clearly 2,000-yard rusher. Broke Terrell Davis's mark for total yards, regular and postseason combined. Probably would have broken Dickerson's record if they'd have played him in Week 18, but they had no reason to play him in Week 18. Division locked up, 2-seed locked up. So no reason for them to play him in Week 18, and he probably would have broken Dickerson's record the first year after leaving the Giants.
Yeah. Had no idea that Nico Harrison also was an investor in the Giants. Had no idea that Nico was in the NFL.
Yeah,
no
idea. Wearing 2 hats.
Equally as fucking toxic and just as good at decision making. Apparently, he's a consultant for the New York Giants, because what a fucking disaster that's turned out.
You aren't kidding.
Yeah, how about completely unrelated to football, switching back over to basketball real quick? How about Kyrie on a live and fucking Lucas saying leave that organization as soon as possible?
Yeah. Shout out Kyrie, pour one out for the homie, tore his ACL, unfortunately. And it sucks that it's like this late in the season, because you're looking at potentially missing some time to start next year. I know basketball is a little less high impact as football, so maybe he can get back a little sooner, but man, having a rehab from an ACL he's like 32 now, I think, or something like that.
Right.
Not good. You hate to see it. That team is just full of bad karma right now, man.
Definitely kind of self-inflicted. I mean, almost like a Gruden curse-esque.
It's
something's in the water out there in Dallas. Hate to see that. And the one bright side of that is that while the Mavs are beginning to struggle, at least we have some potential positive progress out of Dallas as CeeDee Lamb's restructured his deal to kind of open up some more cap space. I love that. I hate that we're seeing D-Law in the free market. Hate that. But whoever's a fan of that team's got a fucking tough year ahead of them. So.
Oh yeah, Jerry's something special, man. He is something special.
Yeah, definitely hate to see that. But either way, kind of interesting. But I'm not surprised to see Matt Stafford stay in LA. Like you said, there was nothing to really lose there, and he was. I mean, similar to a lot of the greats in the back end of their deals, we saw Tom Brady restructuring deals to make sure they can accommodate the people, the weapons needed to protect him, to make sure he's got Puka next year to go throw to, or whoever he needs down range. So yeah. I think it's a good move for the Rams, and then just another nail in the coffin for the Giants next season. That's tough going
for sure.
So, let's see. So I think we've got like a whole section here basically planned out for the combine. So I guess maybe I should probably just jump into the most important part of our show.
Yeah.
So for those of you guys that don't know, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We're a veteran-owned sports podcast. Myself and Gary having served in the Navy. And so we dedicate every episode of our podcast to a fallen service member, and our Folds of Honor sponsor segment we like to call our Salute to Service. This episode is going to be dedicated to Army Private First Class Kevin C. Ott, who passed away June 28, 2003, serving during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was 27 years old, from Columbus, Ohio, and he was assigned to Battery B, 3rd Battalion, 18th Field Artillery Regiment in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and he was killed in action in Iraq June 28th. Army Private First Class Kevin C. Ott. We have the watch. And now we have a ton of combine footage to talk about. For something that I think overall we've had a kind of underwhelming combine. I think in general, in key positions, I would like to clarify that in key positions. One of the bigger underwhelming ones, unfortunately, is the quarterback run. Not as strong as I think we were initially hoping. A couple people underwhelming there. Couple of them definitely showing up and showing the fuck out. So, Gary, you've got a ton of notes in here. I'll let you jump in, and I'll sprinkle a few in there in between.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, my dad mentions Cleveland potentially as a Rodgers landing spot. I think there's that. There's the Giants. There's a couple other spots that he's been linked to. I don't know how many teams are going to be willing to take a chance on him after the way it went in New York, but we'll see. We'll see if he lands somewhere. It's hard to imagine a Hall of Fame quarterback is not going to find a home. But I digress. We have a combine to talk about. First off, I every year I have a conversation with somebody or somebody's, like several people, and it's always like, yeah, the combine this, that, the underwear Olympics. Try to downplay the importance of it because I like the eyeball test. I like video. I like, seeing guys on the field in pads playing the game. But it still matters, man. There's several guys that are going to move up or down. There's a guy that likely went from being undrafted. We're going to talk about quarterbacks likely being undrafted to probably a day 3 pick now. And a guy not to spoil too much, but a guy I think has some potential to be a starter in this fucking league. Ultimately, film is going to be what you lean on, but the combine, there were some real winners and losers from the combine, and you can kind of play your way in and out of rounds, in and out of days, and in and out of the draft, really, at the combine. But you mentioned quarterbacks. I thought the quarterbacks overall, losers at the combine. Dylan Gabriel looked very, very bad. He was so accurate and so efficient in college. He was terrible on Saturday at the combine. He missed so many easy routes. He was overthrowing, underthrowing, leading guys too far, dirt and stuff. Like it was bad, and it just wasn't what I expected from Dylan Gabriel. His deep ball had no real zip on it. Just not great. Will Howard was another one who just flat out stunk. And he played well as like a leader on that Ohio State offense, but he was very, very inaccurate. Didn't do well in the drills. He didn't measure as well as I thought he would have as a guy who was a dual threat quarterback. And then I don't mean any ill will toward Texas, but there's a couple of them that were in this loser group for me. Quinn Ewers is one. I've heard a lot of people try to praise him. Kurt Warner was doing it during the combine. I think Kurt Warner was looking at the wrong quarterback, thinking it was Quinn Ewers, because he was very inaccurate. His feet were really sloppy, and his deep ball was good, not great. He's never been a guy who's got a real good deep ball, but he was very inaccurate on the route tree. I didn't understand why he got a lot of praise at the end of the combine. The Giants, I think by proxy, are losers here because, as I mentioned, this is a 2-quarterback class. And then this group really didn't test very well. They're going to have to either trade back and take Jackson Dart, trade up and get one of the two guys, or they're really going to have to hope that at the end of the first, beginning of the second, a guy, Jackson Dart is there still. I don't know that he's going to get out of the teens. Maybe he gets into the 20s, but they're going to have to expend some draft capital to get their guy one way or the other, or they're going to have to overdraft on a guy. They lost just because of how poorly this quarterback class looked at the combine. On the winner side, though, there was one really, and I'll say Jackson Dart solidified himself as the third best guy. He looked exactly like I expected him to look at the combine. Brady Cook, if you've never heard of him, Bentley and I talked about him a lot on Tailgate Trash Talk this year because he's a super tough guy. He can spin the ball, and he really had that Missouri offense humming. He likely worked himself into day 3. He doesn't measure super well in terms of height, weight. Not a big, sturdy guy, but tough as fucking nails. Played through a ton of injuries in college and played very, very well. That Missouri offense was night and day with and without him. But he threw the ball very, very, very well. He also ran well and tested well in the shuttle. He had a good vertical. He's a guy who I think fits into like a Shanahan-esque system. I look at the Rams. We just talked about Stafford and who's going to kind of be the guy to take the helm after him. They could be an easy, for me, I think could be a real logical landing spot in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, day 3 type pick. Maybe the Vikings, if they want to have some insurance for J.J. McCarthy. Someone along those lines, Green Bay, possibly to back up Love. Someone along those lines with that sort of offensive scheme, I think, is where Brady Cook could fit because he's athletic. He's got a very good arm, and he throws the entire route tree very well. I think he's got starter potential as well. I kind of teased that a moment ago. I think he's got starter potential in this league if he lands in the right spot.
Yeah, we talked about operating in that Shanahan-esque system, and this is another example of a guy who would operate well in that. 100%. Another guy that I wanted to add in there, and not necessarily trying to throw praise to my Aggie friends, but Shamar Stewart at the edge did a really great job into potentially locking in a top 10 money spot, and so that's definitely a good performance there out of him. And then I think he had a 4.6 40, and then more importantly, one of the big things that came out was that he was walking around initially at I think they were expecting him in the mid 280 range, and then he was walking in a little bit leaner at about 267, something like that, I think is what they reported. So it was good to see him come in lean like that. Definitely going to open up some good opportunity for him against a kind of a already competitive edge class.
Yeah, it's a good edge class. He was a guy who was a disruptor at A&M. There were some concerns about what weight he would play at. I think he answered that question, like you mentioned. He trimmed anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds, depending on where you thought he would weigh. Maybe even as much as 20 if you thought he was going to be in the upper 280s. Ran very well, tested very well, showed why he was so good in that Texas A&M defense. Again, Bentley and I talked about it on Tailgate a lot. That's a very, very good defensive front, and he was a big part of the reason why they were On the other side of the edge, unfortunately, Abdul Carter, widely regarded as best athlete in this draft, best edge guy in this draft, was a monster at Penn State. Goes through medicals at the combine and they find a foot injury. It's tough. I don't know how far he'll slide because the reports are it's not that big of a deal, but it is a surgery. It's a procedure. He could slide as far as the teens. I don't think he'll slide any farther than that. Maybe like, I think his floor, his absolute floor would be like 15. I think if he slides past 6 or 7, there's going to be a team that's going to say we can't pass on this guy. Despite the foot injury, I think somebody's going to take him, but unfortunately, he was in talks of being the number 1 pick. If Tennessee stayed where they were at, Jacksonville potentially taking him as well. But I don't know exactly how much this is going to deter teams, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't discovered until he got to the combine.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely unfortunate there. One of the other guys, just quickly looking at my notes here that I wanted to bring up because I did have a second winner I didn't mention earlier before the show started, was actually somebody on the bubble that might have punched their ticket into day 1 picks there. It's Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky. So showing up as now the fastest cornerback in that draft. I mean, the heat that guy had, he did well in his footwork drills. I mean, He definitely turned a lot of heads. So definitely made a point to make a stake for that day 1 pick.
Yeah, you're right. I think he ran himself into the first round. I think there were talks of him being a day 2, probably second round pick. I think he ran himself into the end of the first round. I could see him going, Buffalo needs a guy. Baltimore likes to stack cornerbacks. They drafted the fastest cornerback last year. Washington needs some secondary help. There's a lot of teams in the 20s that you're looking at and could certainly use a guy that you can lock up on the outside that can stick with some of these fast, fucking crazy fast, athletic wide receivers that we've got in the NFL. So I think he's a guy that ran himself and tested himself into somewhere in the 20s, unless the team gets real squirrely in the teens. But I expect him to go somewhere in the 20s. And again, as I mentioned, like I every year I'm like, the combine is it, it's the underwear Olympics and yada yada. But there's usually a guy like this. Xavier Worthy did it last year, ran himself right to the top of the, near the top of the wide receiver class. So much so that the Chiefs traded up to get him. I think Hairston has potential to be that guy this year that ran himself into the 20s somewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams out there now that have started investing in that speed, really, especially when you have the gunslingers, you've got the Pat Mahomes of the world. Like, that was exactly what he needed. He needed that replacement at Cheetah, and he got it. And so with that, you got to be able to defend that motherfucker, and so that's why you got to have somebody just as fast. So definitely exciting there. We've got some losers still left to cover.
Yeah.
Will the quarterback turn up on waivers or something that could help the Giants? I mean,
it's probably Rodgers. It's not a great free agent class for quarterbacks. I think you're looking at, I don't know that they're willing to go get Darnold. I don't know that Darnold wants to go back to New York City. I also think Darnold looks at that situation and doesn't like it after having a great season with Minnesota. I just think that right now it's going to be the Giants having to make a play in the draft to either move up and get their guy at 1 or 2, or they're going to have to maneuver some way to make sure that they get Jackson Dart. I don't think that they're going to look beyond the top 3 in this class. And I think that's where they're going to look. And they're going to look to put a rookie under center next year with Brian Daboll really needing a good season with a young quarterback to save his job.
Yeah. I think likely that's definitely. I mean, again, this just kind of circling back to our point about the Giants. They're in QB hell right now. There is not a lot out there. There's slim pickings, and then now you're going to end up with this fucking decrepit psychopath from just across the bay from you, or just across the way from you playing. He doesn't even have to change it. Does he even have to change locker rooms? How does that work?
No, it's home and away are the same locker room. Yeah.
Anyways, well, jumping into the losers while we're still kind of hot on the topic of Xavier Worthy, a counterpart that's kind of started some shit, and it's self-inflicted again. Listen, I am a diehard Longhorns fan through and through all the live long day. I have always bled this shit, but you made that bet, Isaiah Bond. You made that fucking bet. You were talking all this wild shit. So much so that even your alumni buddy, Xavier Worthy, had to fucking clown you because you had to start shit.
Yeah, not
I've said
good.
it before on the show. They're for the children. Wu-Tang, don't start none, won't be none.
Won't be none. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Coming off a bad year at Texas. He had a good year at Alabama the year prior, went to Texas, and I thought honestly could have a very big year because Texas lost those wide receivers in the draft, and I thought there was an opportunity for Bond to be great. Apparently he's slow. Ran a shit 40, didn't test well. He needed badly to wow the scouts at the combine after the bad year he had at Texas, and he might have fucking tested himself into like day 3, honestly. This might be one of the more precipitous falls we'll ever see as at a wide receiver, because I think that if he'd have ran a 4.3, if he'd have ran a 4.2 40, which is what I thought he was going to threaten, somewhere 4.28, 4.29, I thought he was going to run something like Hairston ran. Didn't, but if he did, I think he could have been a guy that snuck into the first round. Now I think he's a guy that, do you take a chance on him in the 4th, 5th, 6th? This is going to be interesting because he does have measurables. He's a decent, like in terms of body, like NFL body, and he seems to play faster than he ran in the 40. I don't know if he just had a really bad day or what. Maybe at his pro day, maybe at the Texas Pro Day, he'll run a better 40, and we'll start to say like, okay, maybe he'll recover some of that stock value. But right now, this is a guy that could fall from a fringe first rounder to late day 3, midway day 3. Not good. Very bad performance for him. I do want to give the Longhorns some love though, because I shit on Ewers earlier. I shit on Bond here. Matthew Golden ran very, very well. Xavier Worthy shot up last year for the same reason. But Matthew Golden was already regarded as a guy who was likely a first-round pick, just based on his ability to both run the route tree, very good hands, very athletic, very good with the ball in his hands, which also shows up on special teams. He's a guy that can return for you. Now with some of the changes to the kicking game as well, he gives you some value in the return game. But I think that 40 time that he ran ensures that he stays in the first round. So I think he was a winner, especially considering how poorly Bond tested and how far he might fall.
Yeah, kind of an unintentional boost there as well, just at the at the expense of a brother in fucking burnt orange. Definitely hate to see that for him, but all credit there to Golden. I mean, he did his thing. Absolutely. I mean, he knew the value of it. He went out and executed the way that I've seen him execute all season. He's been a dependable guy. What I'm not going to continue to stand for, though, is the continued slander on Quinn. I'm not going to continue to stand for it. And so I can hear the shit that you're saying right now, and that's fine. One thing that I do know is that he's interviewed with almost every fucking team looking for a quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. Pretty common, normal, standard, I would say. One of the things that I am reading about Quinn, because I'm trying to keep in touch with what the fuck's going on there, is that there's a lot of teams interested in Quinn. Yeah. So regardless of whatever it is, however he performed at the combine, I still think it's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to get him the pick that he probably deserves. Do I think he's going to be some like great generational guy in the NFL? Probably not. But, I think it's nothing that he can't develop yet.
Yeah, so I agree. I just think I couldn't understand why everybody was raving about his combine effort. I didn't think it was great, but I also think that he's still a day 2 guy. He still has prototypical size, good arm strength. At times he was very accurate. If you work on his footwork, I think maybe you can fix some of that stuff with him. Decision making is a thing that was a real problem for him throughout his time in college. Very inconsistent. Yep. Coach that out of him. I think you got a guy that can be a fringe starter, but definitely at least a very capable backup in the league. And he's a guy that I think has the tools that he could develop into being a starter. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to, I'll go to the Rams again, right? But if he's the guy in waiting and you give him 2 years to develop and learn from a quarterback guru and a guy who's got a lot of experience and a lot of pelts on the wall in Matthew Stafford, I think that could be a situation where he could become a very good starter in this league. I think it's going to depend on situation. I don't think Ewers is a guy, and I don't think anybody's banging the drum to say that he's the guy that's going to be able to just come in and be successful no matter the situation. But if he goes to a good situation, I think he's got the potential. I just think he had a bad combine. Aaron's not wrong.
Hey, Aaron, good to see you, buddy.
Let's
Yes,
see.
100%. Yeah, anyway, I just don't. I guess where I call it slander is that I don't see enough of his combine footage to say that he did poorly. So underwhelming, sure, but poorly, I don't know. I mean, but again, I think I'm comparing him to everything else I saw in the combine, where you're seeing this was an underwhelming quarterback performance in general. So I guess relative to the curve, he's on par with he's still on scale. But yeah, I guess I can concede that point. Another guy that I wanted to jump at while we're still in the subject of it is Shedeur Sanders. He may have, just strategically by omitting himself from a lot of this shit, may have kind of prevented a lot of attention. Now, I am kind of curious because I know we've got Senior, I know we've got Aaron, a couple guys on the show, and if you're watching here, please let us know your opinions. But Shedeur Sanders may have strategically made the right choice, only because this quarterback class has been underwhelming, and he may have shown to be on par with that. And so that's kind of my angle. That's really kind of what I think, because I do believe that Shedeur Sanders is overrated. I don't think that he's not a fucking Lamar Jackson. We need to stop pretending that he is. He's going to be his own demon, no doubt, but he is not the dual threat quarterback that he is being marketed to be. And I stand firm, and he didn't deserve the fucking, Colorado didn't deserve the goddamn Heisman to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think Shedeur wants to be a dual threat guy. I don't think he's anywhere near as athletic as maybe some people will try to lead you to believe. I think you're right, though, that strategically speaking, and I think that's why, like, when you're one of the top guys, we don't see them throw at the combine very often. We don't see them test too much at the combine. They usually wait till their pro day. Jaden didn't throw at the combine last year. Caleb didn't throw at the combine last year. Guys just don't typically throw at the combine when they're, kind of far and away the top guys in the quarterback class. So Cam Ward didn't throw, Shedeur didn't throw. I think some of the issue that with Shedeur is, like, he's out there kind of being real swaggy, and he's a very confident guy, hat on backwards. And I know Colin Cowherd hates that. But yeah, I mean, teams are going to look it's lying season too, right? So teams are going to try to lie and get their guy to fall to him, right? It could be someone at 6 or 7. It's like, Shedeur's a piece of shit, but I want him at 6 or 7, right? So that sort of stuff happens around the combine. I'm holding out judgment on him and Cam Ward until their pro days, and we'll see how those go. But I still think it's a 2 quarterback class, and then everybody else is it's a project, or it's somebody you either feel good about or don't feel good about. But he probably helped himself by not getting swept up in the chaff of what this quarterback class did at the combine, for sure.
Definitely, no doubt. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, one of the other guys that I kind of wanted to talk about was Scatabo. Just, having the injury, not being able to partake in a few of the things there, might hurt his draft capital there, or his draft investment, what his popularity looks like there. But any reservations or hesitations before his pro day?
I think we'll learn a lot about the injury, the extent of the injury, and kind of what the potential impacts could be when it comes to pro day for him. I think we've got enough tape on him to where he was always going to be like a probably late day 2, maybe early day 3 guy. If he slides a little bit and goes mid-day 3, I wouldn't be entirely surprised either. He's fairly limited when it comes to, like, what he can be in the NFL. He's a very, very skilled, very, very versatile back, but he's not explosive by NFL standards. He's also mediocre when it comes to, like, he's not Mike Allstott, right? Like, he's a power back in college. He's not going to be that in the NFL, but he's a good receiving back. Has some versatility. We saw him throw a ball. There's some potential there. Like, again, if you get him into one of these kind of one-cut offenses like a Shanahan or O'Connell and some of these guys that have these kind of one-cut downhill zone type running schemes, I think he can be successful in those. I don't think that 32 teams in the NFL are going to be interested in Scatabo. I think it's going to be a dozen, and we're going to see where he goes in one of those offenses. And I think he can be successful as, a 1A kind of guy. If you've got another guy in there that's a little more of a, kind of if you get a thunder and lightning type deal with Scatabo and someone else. I don't know that the injury hurt his stock a ton. I know there was a lot of intrigue to see what he ran in the 40 to see how he stacks up against NFL running backs. So if he can't run at his pro day, I think that compounds the issue, right? I think you're absolutely right that it compounds the issue if he can't run at his pro day, because then teams are going to have to look at film. And there are times where he gets run down by a lot of guys. Very powerful guy, little bit of shiftiness, but that top end speed just isn't there. And then you're kind of taking a chance on who you think he can be in the NFL.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. And then the last one was just going to be Harold Fannin Jr., tight end out of Bowling Green. Definitely didn't do so hot there. The big red flag obviously was his 40 time. 4.7 40, not great. He's had a great season, or he's had a great career. And so I was, looking at some of the tight ends and some of these edge guys on the offense. I was hoping to see some heat there, and it just, he was one of the guys that kind of plummeted there in his combine.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that his athletic numbers weren't as high as I thought they might be. I know he did play against kind of inferior competition at Bowling Green, but he had a great year. I wonder if he's one of those guys that's a bit more of a gamer, because he looked very, very good in that offense. I think he's going to slide a little bit. I don't think he was ever going to be the first tight end off the board. I think Warren from Penn State has kind of locked that up right from the get-go. But you're looking at the next tight end off the board. Was it going to be him? Was it going to be a guy like Gadsden? Was it going to be Loveland? Was it, those sorts of things? I don't know now how hard he falls. And yeah, I think my dad's absolutely right here. I noticed it last year, like production was way down from the tight end position, and I don't know what causes it. But I know teams are going to be looking for whatever that answer is at tight end. And I don't know if they look at Harold Fannin now and say, like, that's our guy, because his athletic numbers were not great at the combine.
Yeah, my kind of takeaway at the TE position is I think Gadsden may have actually edged him out based off of this combine. Just based on that. So may have slid him out of that TE2 position. Obviously with Warren locking it down.
I love Aronde Gadsden. I sang his praises all year on Tailgate. I think he's a wide receiver playing tight end. Not a great blocker, and I think that's going to be the biggest knock on him for NFL teams. But if you can use him, like Laporta's a little better blocker than him, but I think, you look at a guy like Tony Gonzalez, you look at a guy like Jimmy Graham, that sort of thing. I think that's what Aronde Gadsden can be. His dad was a freak athlete at the wide receiver position, had a decent NFL career, but I think Gadsden, if he goes to a team, I think if Gadsden goes to a team that realizes, like, we're just going to use him as a receiving tight end, we're going to split him out and get him matched up against safeties and corners and hope that he can just body him up. And linebackers can't keep up with him in terms of, athleticism. A lot of linebackers won't be able to. I think that's the perfect situation for a guy like that.
Definitely.
He's not a guy who goes to a Shanahan-esque offense because they want guys that can block.
No, yeah, they want that guy setting blocks all the plays. Yeah.
They want George Kittle, and he is not George Kittle.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Trying to look through the notes here to see if there's anyone else. I think there was one last one that you had here by the name of Tez Johnson.
Yeah, I've got a couple left. Tez Johnson is one of them. Yeah, I think he was the biggest loser, honestly. I think he was the biggest loser of the combine. Very tiny, weighed in at 154 pounds. Like, I weighed that my fucking freshman year of high school. Like, and I know, like, he's an explosive guy, but he's also apparently slow and not explosive at the combine. He tested terribly in the 40, terribly in the shuttle drill, but he ran the fastest mile per hour for a wide receiver during drills. His measurables were terrible. Teams are going to have to look at the tape, and he is so small. I don't know where he fits. He's obviously going to be a slot guy that maybe can get over the top, gadget guy. Maybe the Chiefs take a chance on him because Andy Reid's very good with those gadget guys. Yep. I think he was the biggest loser of the draft because he had an opportunity to be a first-round wide receiver based on his production in college. I don't think there's a chance he goes on day one. I maybe not even day two. He might be a day three guy that a team's like, we got to pick here. We can take a chance on a guy. Somewhere, Detroit, they do a lot of gadget stuff with wide receivers. I just don't know where he fits because he's not a guy you're going to line up against a cornerback and say, like, go win on your route, bud.
Yeah, he gives Tyler Lockett, but smaller.
Yeah, so, really, that's a good comparison.
Trying to think of the other guy.
Like he's a bigger.
Yeah, I don't even know that I can give him that credit. I was trying to think of who's the other guy.
He reminds me of Tavon Austin when Tavon Austin came out because he was
there. You go, Tavon Austin
in college. Tavon Austin was just an electric freak show in college, but he was just so small. Other than punt returns in the NFL, they couldn't really figure out how to use him offensively. Unfortunately for Tez, I could see him having a very similar arc to like a Tavon Austin, who had some electric plays here and there, but never really solidified himself as a primetime performer in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Stature is going to definitely play a part there.
Yeah.
Who else you got, Gary?
Last one is Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. There was some talk that he might go as high as top 10, definitely in the teens. Might have played himself out of the teens at the combine, might have measured himself out. Slow.
Lead cleats?
Oh my God. It seemed like there was
jump,
something
couldn't
wrong.
run, couldn't do
run,
shit.
Couldn't jump, nothing. Like he was just terrible. Maybe at his pro day he recovers and we see more of what we saw. On film, he's a guy who's awesome. On film, he's a guy who can cover ground, who can hit, who can play very, very well. But the big men. Yeah, big men balling.
We out there.
But Malachi Starks might have played himself out of the teens. And I know Buffalo is looking for some secondary help. If they're willing to overlook the combine performance and say, we like what we see on film, because I like what I saw on film from him. I thought he was a guy who should be somewhere top 15 at least. If he slides to Buffalo, maybe they're willing to take a chance because they need some secondary help. They definitely need safety help. He could be a guy that might go there and you rely on your eyeball, right? The eyeball test when it comes to film with Malachi Starks.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Sounds like a few of these are going to be deferring judgment to pro day, I think is the safe way of putting it. Fortunately, they've got another day to be able to kind of prove that. But, not a great showing for a lot of guys and definitely some folks moving up.
Dude, prospects. That's a good way to put it, where you're just like you're being chased by a murderer and you can't run fast enough. That's what it felt like for Malachi Starks. He was just like stuck in fucking mud. It was so weird because he's on film. He is an incredibly athletic safety. I don't know what happened to him on his combine performance. Maybe he was dehydrated. Maybe he needed some milk. I have no idea.
He needs some milk.
But it was not good. Not good. Unfortunate for a guy that I think could be a very good pro, but that was not good.
Yeah. Guess we'll just have to look towards the pro day to be able to kind of see how that turns out. What else we got, Gary? Anything else in closing?
We've got some winners to run down still. Got a few of those in the chamber.
Well, good. Well, let's keep it running.
Yeah, we've talked about the running back class. I just want to reemphasize, like, this running back class is fucking loaded. He was terrible. Will Howard was terrible. Just slow in his measurables, very inaccurate. Maybe it was some timing issues with unfamiliar receivers, but he was airmailing shit, dirt and shit. He didn't look good at all.
Dog shit.
He and Dylan Gabriel didn't look good. But running back class, absolutely loaded. Quinshon Judkins, I think, reopened the conversation of like who's the third running back off the board. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be TreVeyon Henderson. Quinshon Judkins tested very well, and he's bigger than TreVeyon Henderson, and he's a bit more of a power back than TreVeyon Henderson, yet he caught the ball very well, ran routes very well, and absolutely destroyed a lot of the footwork drills that they were doing with running backs. Travion Henderson, I think, is phenomenal. Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech played himself into a lot of people's minds as a very good receiving back. Dude out of Delaware, his name is eluding me now, but the Blue Hens are about to put a running back in the NFL. Famous Blue Hen, Joe Flacco, elite still at the age of 55 or whatever. But this running back class is so loaded. A lot of guys that can do it all. You got Genty, you've got Omarion Howard. Caleb Johnson's going to be a very good one-cut running back. He ran kind of slow, but I think he's a guy who's going to be a really good downhill runner in the NFL. I mentioned the two thoroughbreds out of Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Delaware. Across the board, the running back class was absolutely stunning at
electric. Hundo Peasy. One of the best running back classes we've seen in a while.
Yeah, for sure. Just running down the list a little bit. Landon Jackson, edge guy out of Arkansas, very good film, but they weren't sure how he was going to test. Really showed out athletically. Probably moved himself up from day 2 to somewhere in the 20s on day 1. Also, shout out Charlie Villanueva. Landon Jackson has the same. I always forget the name of it, but the same affliction where he doesn't grow any hair. Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina. He joins DK Metcalf as the only player 6'3" or taller to run sub 4.4, jump 40 inches in the vertical, and a broad jump of 11 feet. Absolute fucking freak show athletically, which was the common thing for fucking South Carolina football. I know Bentley, he and I talked a little bit about it, but Emanwari tested like crazy. Josh Simon tested like crazy. He was like number 2 across the board for tight ends in the measurables. Demetrius Knight, Rocket Sanders, another running back that tested very well. Athletes everywhere from South Carolina, but Nick Emanwari probably solidified himself as like the fucking guy to target if you're looking for an absolute nasty athlete in the defensive secondary. And last one here, Iowa State football. I know they were picked to finish last in the Big 12 last year, ended up winning the Big 12. Shout out to them. But Jaden Higgins, he might be a more athletic T. Higgins, big guy, very physical, but also
like that.
Tested very, very well athletically. His measurables in terms of height, weight, and kind of his wingspan and stuff, very close to T. Higgins. I didn't do that only for the last name. It's weird how close they are in terms of like their physical measurements. But Jaden Higgins was more athletic than T. Higgins. Jalen Noel silenced all the doubts about athleticism. He was their number 1 receiver last year. The questions were whether or not he was going to be strong enough to compete with NFL defensive backs. He silenced those critics. Darian Porter, cornerback, moved up to day 2. 40 time might sneak him at the end of the first round. He ran very, very well. He's got some real upside as a starter on the outside. So Iowa State football had a very good combine.
100%. 100%. Lots of strength coming out of South Carolina and and out of Iowa. So not so popular names getting all kinds of attention this combine. 100%.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What else we got?
I think that's it, man. Looking forward to pro days. I think pro days are going to be where we're going to see. Obviously, we'll see some of the guys who didn't throw, didn't test. Some of them will test. I think that's going to be a nice differentiator. But I do really like that free agency opens before the draft now. So I think we're going to be able to have a much more like finger on the pulse of exactly what teams are going to want to do in the draft because of what they do in free agency.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the clarity on draft day going into this as just a fan is going to be awesome to be able to have that insight, no doubt. I'm really looking forward to it. And for pro day, I mean, in the words of the great Scott Hansen, pro day is going to be a lot like the witching hour, where fucking wins become losses and losses becomes wins. This is your opportunity, talking to everyone who participated or maybe didn't participate in the combine, to take your chance to make your statement and to fucking take your stand to get into the highest possible pick in the upcoming NFL draft. So best of luck to all those guys that are going to be in there. How many? The rest of them?
The rest of them, maybe.
The rest of them.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Everything less the pick they gave up for Saquon.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. We're gonna throw the fucking house at him. Jalen Carter's paid off well. There's a number of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from all of us here at Backyard Sports, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to come back and check in with us after the pro day. I'm sure we're going to be talking more about that stuff and kind of where our final picks are before we start the free agency and then the NFL draft. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Gary, you got anything else for the people?
No, stay tuned. We'll be talking NFL draft here pretty soon, and we'll have a lot of free agency. It's an interesting free agent class. You don't have the big kind of superstar names necessarily, but there are a lot of impact guys that will be picked up in free agents. I mentioned the defensive back class is pretty deep, the offensive line, and then we still got the Myles Garrett stuff out there. DK Metcalf requested a trade. There's potentially going to be some breaking trade news as well for us to cover here in a couple of weeks. So we're going to try to stay active for the listeners out there in the off season, and expect another show here in a couple of weeks.
Hundo peasy. Definitely glad to see you guys again. Aaron, Corey, caught you there at the end. Senior, always a pleasure. We'll see you guys next time here on Backyards Blitz, brought to you by Backyard Sports Media. See you next time. We're out of here.